Daf Yomi, Tractate Zevachim, page 109a, top of the page. New Mishnah. First words on the page are the Mishnah. The words are Echad Kadashim. Echad Kadashim Ksherin, Echad Kadashim Pesulin, Shaya Pasulan Bakoidesh, Yekrivan Machutz Chayav. With regard to both fit sacrificial animals and unfit sacrificial animals whose disqualification occurred in sanctity, meaning in the course of the temple service, and one sacrificed them outside the temple courtyard, he is liable. Okay? He's liable. One who offers outside the courtyard an olive bulk made up of the flesh of a burnt offering and of its sacrificial portions is liable. That's the whole Mishnah. Now the Talmud. Zog the Talmud, Torah Rabbanon, Asher Yaroila Ozevach, Ein Yehoshua Minayin Rabbi Simurei Osham, Vimurei Chatos, Vimurei Kadoshim, Vimurei Kadoshim Kalim, Talmud Lomar Zevach. The sages taught in the Braita. The verse states with regard to offering up outside the courtyard that offers up a burnt offering or sacrifice, and he will not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to sacrifice it to the Lord. Leviticus 17:8 and 9. From the term burnt offering, I have derived only that one is liable for offering up a burnt offering which is burnt entirely on the altar. From where do I derive to include that one is liable for offering up outside the courtyard the sacrificial portions of the guilt offering, the sacrificial portions of the sin offering, the sacrificial portions of offerings of the most sacred order, or the sacrificial portions of offerings of lesser sanctity? The verse states sacrifice, which includes the sacrificial portions of all other offerings that are to be burned on the altar. Okay? Minayin l'rabois kamis v'ravoina v'ketoyres v'nachzgohan v'nachzgoy Mashiach Yaminazer shlosh l'giyayim shlosh l'rimayim v'lo amar el Pesach o el Moed lo yivienu kol mal Pesach o el Moed l'chayim alav pachutz. From where is it derived to include that one is liable for offering up outside the courtyard the handful taken from a meal offering, the frankincense that was to be offered with it, the incense, which was offered each day in the sanctuary, the meal offering of priests, the meal offering of the anointed priest, meaning the high priest, which he offered daily, and to include as liable one who pours as a libation 3 log of wine, which is the volume of the smallest wine libation used in the temple, or one who pours as a libation 3 log of water that was consecrated to be used as a libation during the festival of Sukkot. The verse states, and he will not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting, Leviticus 17 verse 9, which indicates that with regard to any offering that is fit to be brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting, to be offered there upon the altar, one is liable for offering it up outside the courtyard. I have derived only that one is liable for offering up fit offerings. From where do I derive that to also include liability for unfit offerings whose disqualification occurred in sanctity? Kegon, for example, Halan. ושקיב לבסול וזו גויס דמו, הניתוני למטה שנותו למעלו, והניתוני למעלו שנותו למטו. והניתנים בחוץ שנתנן בפנים, והניתנים בפנים שנתנן בחוץ. ופסח בחצר שנתנן שלא לשמן, for example, sacrificial meat that was left overnight, or an offering that went outside the courtyard, or an offering that is impure, or an offering that was slaughtered with intent to consume it beyond its designated time, or outside its designated area, or an offering that is unfit, that an unfit person collected and sprinkled its blood, or if one placed the blood that is to be placed above the red line, encircling the altar below it, or if one placed the blood that is to be placed below the red line above it, or if one placed the blood that is to be placed inside the sanctuary, outside on the external altar, or if one placed the blood that is to be placed outside the sanctuary, inside it, or a paschal offering or sin offering, whose blood was placed not for their sake. Binayin taman lomar lo yivienu lasos kol b'skam l'pesach and moed chayav v'noleh b'chutz. Since the disqualification of these offerings occurred in sanctity, if they were to be, albeit unlawfully, placed upon the altar would render them acceptable such that they should not be removed from upon it. From where is it derived to also include liability for these unfit offerings? The verse states, and he will not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to sacrifice it to the Lord. Which indicates that with regard to any item that is rendered acceptable upon the altar at the entrance of the tent of meeting, even if it should not have been brought there ab initio, one is liable for offering it up outside the courtyard. In the Mishnah teaches one who offers up outside the courtyard an olive bulk made up of the flesh of a burnt offering and of its sacrificial portions is liable. The Gemara infers the Mishnah states that for an olive bulk combined of the flesh of a burnt offering and of its sacrificial portions, yes, one is liable by inference for an olive bulk combined of the meat of a peace offering and of its sacrificial portions. One is not liable because its meat is eaten, not burned on the altar. We learn in the Mishnah that with the sages, that which the sages taught explicitly in a Braita, Tosefta, Megillah 128, the flesh of a burnt offering and its sacrificial portions combine to form the minimum measure of an olive bulk to render one liable for offering them up outside the courtyard, to render one liable for eating them due to pigul, meaning if the sacrificial rites were performed with the intent of sacrificing the offering after its designated time, notar, meaning if its flesh remained after the period in which it was performed, permitted to sacrifice it, or for eating them while he was ritually impure. This Braita too states that only the flesh and sacrificial portions of a burnt offering combined. This indicates that the meat and sacrificial portions of a peace offering do not combine. Bishlama halat ola licharil in shlamim lo ela bigam lo vitame my time. The Gemara asks, granted, with regard to offering up outside the courtyard, it is logical that for a burnt offering, which is entirely consumed upon the altar, yes, everything will combine, and that for peace offerings, whose meat is not burned on the altar, the meat and sacrificial portions will not combine. But with regard to liability for pigul, no Torah eating while ritually impure, what is the reason that the Braita differentiates between a burnt offering and a peace offering? Yehatanan kol habigulin ristarvin kol notar ristarvin kashe pigul kashe nozar. The Gemara compounds its questions. And didn't we learn in the Mishnah, Megillah 15a, anything that is pigul combines together, and anything that is notar combines together to form the measure of an olive bulk to render one liable? The Mishnah indicates that this halacha applies to all types of offerings. Accordingly, the Gemara notes, the ruling about pigul in the Braita is difficult, as it is contradicted by the ruling about pigul in the Mishnah. And the ruling about notar in the Braita is difficult, as it is contradicted by the ruling about notar in the Mishnah. Pigul lo kashem, kami pigul, kami machshavas pigul. The Gemara resolves the difficulties. That the ruling about pigul in the Braita is contradicted by the ruling about pigul in the Mishnah is not difficult. Here in the Mishnah, the ruling that they combine concerns liability for eating pigul, whereas there, in the Braita, the ruling that only the parts of burnt offering combined concerns pigul intention. I don't see what's the difference between pigul intention and pigul. Same thing. Pigul isn't intention. I don't get it. An offering is rendered by pigul if one intends to eat an olive bulk of it after a designated time for eating it, or to sacrifice an olive bulk of it after a designated time for sacrificing. The Braita rules that for burnt offering, if one has such intention for both half an olive bulk of its meat and half an olive bulk of its sacrificial portions, that is sufficient for the entire offering to be rendered pigul. For peace offering, the offering is rendered pigul only if one has such intention about an olive bulk comprised only of meat or only of sacrificial portions. Okay. Notar lokashi kan minotar kan bishin ni tor teru ad shelo nizrakadam. The Gemara resolves the second difficulty. The ruling about notar in the Braita is contradicted by the ruling about notar in the Mishnah. It's not difficult. Here in the Mishnah, the ruling that they combine concerns liability for eating notar, whereas there, in the Braita, the ruling that only the parts of a burnt offering combined concerns a case in which only an olive bulk combined of both the flesh and the sacrificial portions remain from the offering. The rest have been destroyed before its blood was sprinkled. Blood may not be sprinkled unless an olive bulk of the offering remains, and if the blood is not sprinkled, the offering will never be rendered notar. The Braita rules that in a case of a burnt offering, the different parts of it combine to form an olive bulk to permit the sprinkling of the blood. This does not apply to a peace offering, for which an olive bulk of it, of only meat or of only sacrificial portions, must remain in order to permit the sprinkling of the blood. Umani Rabbi Yehoshua Tanya Rabbi Yehoshua Omer Kol Zevachim Shebetoira Shinishtayer Bahem Gazais Baso Gazais Chelev Zorek Al Adam. It's a dam. We turn on to 1 B. Okay. Okay. The Gemara asks, and whose opinion is expressed in the Braita? It is the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua as it is taught in the Braita. Rabbi Yehoshua says, with regard to all the offerings that are mentioned in the Torah, from which there remains only an olive bulk of meat, the rest having been destroyed or rendered impure. Now we turn to 109b. Or from which there remains only an olive bulk of sacrificial portions, for example, fat, to be burned on the altar, one still sprinkles the blood of the offering on the altar, and one thereby fulfills his obligation. Okay, we'll continue with side B.